The following content has been provided by RWTH Aachen University.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to DIS1 today. Today is going to be a fun class because it'll be about something that you can use even more universally than the things that you've already learned in this class. Today, we're going to talk about visual design. Before we jump into that topic, we will do a quick review just to make sure that you guys are back in the mental space for this class. And to jog your memory a bit, here's a couple of questions. First one, we talked about levels of processing. When people interact with something, we can think of them interacting with it at 3 different levels. So let's see, without glancing at your notes, can you remember one or maybe all of those levels? Yeah, Fabian, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a visceral level, which is like your gut instinct level or a gut reaction. Then we have a behavioral level, which is something we have learned. And then we do have a reflective level, something which needs more processing and a little bit of thinking. Yep,
good. Those are the 3 levels, exactly. Visceral, behavioral, and reflective. Next thing we talked about was knowledge in the world and knowledge in the head. What's the importance of knowledge in the world for people that interact with stuff, with their environment?
The importance is that we don't have to remember everything, or even if we don't know something, we can still sort of understand it by the knowledge which we can see in the world.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be precise knowledge, right? The 1-cent coin example is a good one to remember that. Next, we talked about feedback in a little more detail. It came up before as a topic, but what do we mean when we talk about feedback in HCI? And why is feedback important? Like, what's its role in the interaction with technology? Yeah, Aparna.
So feedback lets us know whether a particular action basically resulted in something happening in the system. It could be like you performed an action and you want to know what is the result of it, whether it is done. For example, a coffee machine showing a blinking light once the coffee is done. So also the feedback that comes out, it should be proper. It shouldn't be just an informative light or something. Rather, it should be more precise so that the user exactly understands what happened. So
right, exactly. And we talked about that the different levels of processing the outcome of things happening in the world are where feedback can be measured, like how good it is, right? The blinking light may be clearly visible from a perceptual point of view, but it may not tell us what's going on the interpretive level of processing the outcome of our actions. Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like just to add, because in HCI, word, it basically means interaction. It's not one-way action. It's basically means double-way interaction. So we have kind of request and then response. So this feedback is an essential part of this response that we get.
Very good. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it is a two-way street for sure. Plus also, even if we don't do an action, we can sometimes already talk about feedback, or in certain cases you can talk about feed forward, right? Even just seeing when I touch a keyboard and feel the keys, I'm already getting something from the system as a whole, even though I haven't triggered any action yet. Okay. Then we talked about all the kinds of errors that people make, and we took Norman's very rough sort of split of errors into 2 different kinds of things: mistakes and slips. So do you guys recall what the difference between mistakes as a whole group and slips as a whole other group was? I'll give you guys a few seconds to jog your memory. mistakes and slips. Yeah, Tejaswini, go ahead.
Yeah, so mistakes are the result of like some conscious decisions that you may have made.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the wrong goal or you had a wrong plan, whereas slips are like just something small going going wrong, and because you were not paying enough attention or because you had something else on your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So like those are slips.
Okay, exactly. So it depends on whether we actually had a goal that was right to start with, and then sort of the whole execution of it, the breaking it down into action sequences was messed up, or that would be a slip. Or if the goal that we started with was actually wrong for some kind of reason, we misinterpreted the situation and formed the wrong goal, for example. And we may do exactly what we intended to do, but it might still be a kind of error. All right, and then since mistakes are hard to catch because people have made up their mind what they want to do, but slips could be easier to catch for an interactive system, right? That has limited understanding of what's going on around it, of course. So with slips, that's why we looked at those a little more in detail, because there's actually something that we can help with in interaction design to avoid those. And because of that reason, we looked at them in more detail and identified a couple different types of slips. So we broke them down into two very, very rough categories again, and then inside those, there were a couple more detailed ones. Anybody remember the two fundamental categories, the two basic categories of slips? Zainab, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Some problems with my audio.
Sorry, Zainab, didn't quite catch that.
I have some problems with my audio, but can you hear me now?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so they are action-based slips, so where you just perform the wrong action, and I think then they are memory lapse.
Mm-hmm.
So your memory played, and therefore you intended the wrong action.
Yep, that's right. By the way, we're not seeing you. If you don't want to turn on your video, you don't have to. You can go into your profile, by the way, in Zoom and just drop in a still image of yourself so that people know who you are
Okay,
if you
yes.
don't want to run video. Okay, good. So that's the action-based and memory lapse slips. And then inside the action-based ones were several more detailed ones, but I'll leave you to review that from the slides and from Norman's book. So now let's jump into visual design. First of all, why are we looking at visual design? Why is that a topic? Because Victor just mentioned, that interaction is a two-way road, and that's perfectly right. But a lot of it actually, or half of it, if you like, goes one way, right? Goes from the system to the user. And if for a moment we dissect interaction into these two directions, input and output, then we can look at just the output modality where the system is displaying something to me. And we can ask ourselves, okay, even if we don't look at all the ways that people will interact with the thing and change it dynamically and so on, even if we just look at the presentation of an interface, how it presents itself, what it looks like visually, even there we can already apply some golden rules and some universal principles of design. And the cool thing about that is that this is, of course, a field that is much, much, much older than computers, right, than HCI, because we've actually been doing visual design, layout of information in essentially a two-dimensional space for hundreds of years. And ever since we've been doing writing, we've laid out information. So anybody who has been designing posters, business cards, any kinds of flyers, magazines, print media, has been doing exactly this. So the nice thing for HCI is that it can just go in and learn from decades of experience doing visual design and understanding what people have learned what kind of things work well, what kind of things you need to pay attention to. That's why this visual design, you could consider it as the usability of paper, if you like. Something that is just, even if it's just printed on a piece of paper, it has an interface, and that interface is in this case purely output. But you can look at how usable is that piece of information, how well is it presented. Those of you who are studying technical communication, that's what a lot of your classes are about, right? So we will look at sort of the aesthetic visual design aspects of that, not so much at what words you should be putting down, but how you should arrange things, objects, shapes, etc. So it applies not just to normal user interfaces in mobile apps or desktop apps, it applies to websites, it applies to your next presentation that you're going to be giving with PowerPoint or whatever. It applies to the next paper that you'll be writing your thesis, where you will be doing diagrams and laying out your text. It'll apply to any semester report that you write. It'll apply to any posters that you create for exhibitions or conferences, any flyers that you make for your first startup to get rich and famous. This is stuff that you can really take and apply every time you put stuff into a 2D design. When you will be done with DIS1, and especially sort of Norman's approach to looking at interaction will change your perception of a lot of things when you go through your everyday lives. And similarly, this visual design stuff, which is not from the Norman book, by the way, will change your perception of 2D designs. So I'll be turning you into even more grumpy nitpickers. Now you're going to walk by the next poster inside a shopping window, and you say, oh, that's a bad design. It didn't apply this principle and that principle. But hopefully you'll also see the good examples of that. So in other words, we could say visual design is sort of the static foundation of designing anything interactive, right? You need to get your static design right. Otherwise, there's no way to fix that with your interactive design, right? When the interface starts having behavior and change and dynamics. And if you apply this to everything you're going to be doing from now on in the rest of your life, including the next resume that you write, etc., all the work that you create will just look more professional. It'll look more organized. It'll look more unified, and it will look more interesting. That's actually taken straight from the book that we're building this today's class on, from the author Robin Williams. So much of this is taken from that book, the Non-Designer's Design book. I'll give you a reference at the end of this class. So that's also why we won't be sharing all the details of this class in the public posting of this video, because we're using copyrighted material excerpts from the book. So you'll only be able to find that in our private Moodle channel. A lot of what I've shown you today was taken from the Non-Designer's Design book by Robin Williams. It's a bestseller. It's probably the best known book about this particular topic, especially for people who don't have a formal training in design. Two other books that I can recommend is the Designing Mobile Interfaces book, because it goes through a lot of these things as well, and it's formulated as a pattern language. And there is a German example here if you're interested in more on typography. I just pulled out one, although that's a recommendation that a typographer gave me, a friend of mine. But the one that we used most examples from today was the book by Robin Williams. And just to entertain you, to finish up, this was what our Designing Interactive Systems 1 slides looked like 2 years ago. And as you can see, we kind of learned a lesson as well and ate our own dog food and redesigned that to have a stronger visual alignment to the left, to have a clearer contrast than this like blue and black that we had before, and to clean up things a bit and to have alignment, for example, with the logo font, with the bottom of the logo text here and this. So there's a lot of thought that went into the redesign that we did there a couple years ago. All right, with that, I'm done. Thank you very much for sticking around. Victor, you had a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, in the old internet, time wings were in blue. Now the time changed. So how should we proceed with this? I see also this fact in your slides.
Yeah, blue used to be the color for links, right? That was the initial web sort of semantics that was just created as a random, I mean, he was, Tim Berners-Lee was a physicist, right? So he just picked a color. And for a while that stuck around, but I think nowadays the blue color for links is becoming increasingly less relevant as a queue. People are using other kinds of queues for providing information where links are. And so that color scheme is going away a little. Thanks, everybody, and see you next time.
This content was provided by RWTH Aachen University.